A freighter carrying a crew of 29 disappeared on Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far, no survivors have been found. The freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, was transporting iron ore when it ran into high winds and 25-foot waves.
Beneath the icy waters of Lake Superior rests the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, a steel giant once hailed as the pride of the American side. On November 10, 1975, she vanished without warning. No distress call, no survivors, only silence. For decades, theories tried to explain her sudden end: a rogue wave, a hidden shoal, or structural failure. Families grieved without answers, and the Fitzgerald became legend, immortalized in song, yet locked in mystery. Now, nearly 50 years later, advanced AI has scanned the wreck in unprecedented detail. What it revealed wasn't just twisted steel, but chilling evidence that changes everything we thought we knew. The Fitzgerald didn't simply vanish. She may have been doomed long before that storm arrived. This is the story of how technology finally uncovered the truth behind one of the Great Lakes' greatest tragedies. A titan of the Great Lakes. When the SS Edmund Fitzgerald was launched in 1958, she was more than just another freighter. At 729 feet long, she was the largest vessel ever to sail the Great Lakes, an engineering marvel designed to carry staggering loads of taconite iron ore from Minnesota to the steel mills of the Midwest. Built at the Great Lakes Engineering Works and financed by Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance, she represented both industrial power and human ambition. From the very beginning, the Fitzgerald captured the public's imagination. Her gleaming white superstructure and burgundy hull stood out against the gray waters, earning her nicknames like the Queen of the Great Lakes and the Pride of the American Side. People lined the shores to watch her pass beneath bridges or lock through narrow channels, her horn echoing like a giant's voice across the water. She wasn't just a ship, she was a spectacle, a floating icon of American industry. But what truly set her apart was not her appearance, it was her reputation. The Fitzgerald became known for her speed and efficiency, often breaking cargo delivery records. This reliability built loyalty among her crew, many of whom returned voyage after voyage. Life aboard was demanding, but sailors trusted the ship. She endured storms, ice, and fog on hundreds of journeys without serious incident. To many, she seemed unsinkable. Her final captain, Ernest McSorley, embodied that same confidence. A seasoned mariner nearing retirement, McSorley was admired for his calm judgment and steady authority. He had weathered countless gales and icy passages, and he trusted the Fitzgerald as one of the strongest ships on the water. His crew shared that faith. For nearly 2 decades, the vessel had a spotless record. No major breakdowns, no casualties, no failed voyages. By the mid-1970s, the Fitzgerald had become part of the cultural fabric of the region. Tourists photographed her from the Soo Locks. Children recognized her silhouette from shore. And eventually, Gordon Lightfoot's ballad would immortalize her. She was not only a workhorse of the Great Lakes, but a symbol of pride, strength, and endurance. No one, least of all her crew, could have imagined that this symbol of reliability would vanish into silence on a cold November night. The storm of November, 1975. On the afternoon of November 9th, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald departed Superior, Wisconsin, loaded with over 26,000 tons of taconite pellets, bound for Detroit. It was a route she had completed countless times, but this voyage would prove different. A storm system was developing over the Great Lakes, and forecasts warned of gale-force winds and heavy seas. Even so, freighters of the Fitzgerald's size were built to endure rough weather, and confidence ran high. By the morning of November 10th, the storm had exploded into one of the fiercest ever recorded on Lake Superior. Winds howled at more than 70 miles per hour, and waves rose over 25 feet high, pounding relentlessly against the freighter's steel hull. Snow squalls and freezing spray blinded the horizon, reducing visibility to nearly nothing. Even seasoned sailors described the conditions as among the worst they had ever faced. Captain Ernest McSorley remained calm and steady. Throughout the day, he radioed updates to the nearby freighter, Arthur M. Anderson. His messages mentioned problems, a bad list, a lost vent, and damage to the hatch covers, but his tone stayed reassuring. "We are holding our own," he reported, signaling both determination and belief that the Fitzgerald could survive the pounding storm. But Lake Superior was merciless. The wind screamed louder, and the waves grew taller, crashing over the deck with bone-crushing weight. Ice clung to the superstructure, adding dangerous weight to a ship already stressed by the storm. The Anderson continued tracking the Fitzgerald on radar, keeping close in case assistance was needed. Then, just after 7:10 p.m., McSorley's final transmission came through. "We are holding our own." Moments later, the Fitzgerald disappeared from radar. No mayday, no flare, no cry for help. Just silence. Within minutes, the largest ship on the Great Lakes, and the 29 men aboard her, were gone. Swallowed whole by the storm, the Fitzgerald left nothing but questions. Why had she gone down so suddenly? Why no distress signal? And how could such a mighty vessel vanish so completely in the span of a heartbeat? Wreckage in the depths. In the hours following the Fitzgerald's disappearance, the U.S. Coast Guard launched an urgent search. Aircraft scanned the storm-tossed waters, cutters battled through towering waves, and nearby freighters joined in the desperate effort. But the searchers found no survivors, only fragments of lifeboats, bits of wreckage, and thin streaks of oil floating on the surface. For the families of the 29 men, the silence was unbearable. Days later, sonar scans revealed the unthinkable. The Fitzgerald lay broken on the bottom of Lake Superior, more than 500 feet below the surface. When expeditions later reached the site, they discovered the ship in two massive sections. The bow rested upright, its steel sides half buried in the lakebed sediment, while the stern lay inverted and twisted a short distance away. The wreckage bore the marks of violent destruction: bent beams, torn steel, and scattered debris. The eerie stillness of the site offered no easy answers. How had a vessel built for strength and speed come apart so suddenly? Investigators studied the wreckage, but the depth and conditions made exploration difficult. Early dives provided only fleeting glimpses of the broken hull, while grainy sonar images left more questions than clarity. Theories multiplied. Some argued that structural failure caused the Fitzgerald to snap in two on the surface before sinking. Others believed she may have struck an uncharted shoal, tearing open her bottom. A few suggested that an enormous rogue wave, larger than 30 feet, overwhelmed her without warning. Yet none of these ideas could be proven. For decades, the wreckage became both a grave and a monument. It stood as a reminder of the storm's fury. Families sought closure, but the lake guarded its secrets. Each twisted beam and fractured plate seemed to whisper of the violence of that night, yet the final cause remained hidden in the cold, dark depths. the Edmund Fitzgerald was no longer just a shipwreck. She was a puzzle frozen in silence, challenging generations of divers, engineers, and historians to find answers that always seemed just out of reach. Half a century of theories. From the moment the Fitzgerald vanished, the search for answers began. Families wanted closure, investigators sought explanations, and sailors across the Great Lakes demanded to know how such a mighty vessel could sink without warning. Over the years, dozens of theories emerged, each one offering possibilities, but none delivering certainty. The first official report came from the U.S. Coast Guard in 1977. Their conclusion was straightforward, if controversial. The hatch covers had failed during the storm. These massive steel covers, held down by hundreds of clamps, were meant to keep the cargo holds dry. According to the Coast Guard, powerful waves had loosened or damaged them, allowing water to pour in until the Fitzgerald lost buoyancy. It was a neat explanation, but not everyone accepted it. Families of the lost crew pushed back hard. Captain McSorley and his men were known for their discipline and professionalism. To suggest that they had neglected something as basic as securing hatch covers felt like an insult. The grieving families argued that the real cause lay elsewhere, either in the storm's unmatched fury or in flaws within the ship itself. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, later suggested a different possibility, that the Fitzgerald had suffered catastrophic structural failure. After nearly 2 decades of hauling heavy loads through punishing weather, her steel may have weakened. Under the stress of 25-foot waves and hurricane-force winds, she could have literally snapped apart. Other theories circulated in maritime circles. Some believed she ran aground on a poorly charted shoal, tearing open her bottom. Others pointed to the possibility of rogue waves, 3 massive sisters striking in succession that overwhelmed the freighter in seconds. There were even whispers of supernatural curses, born from the ship's eerie silence and sudden disappearance. Despite multiple investigations and expeditions, none of these theories gained universal acceptance. Each offered fragments of truth, but none could explain the entire tragedy. And so, as the decades passed, the Edmund Fitzgerald's sinking became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in maritime history. For answers to emerge, technology would need to evolve beyond sonar shadows and grainy photographs. The wreck itself would have to speak, and nearly 50 years later, it finally did. A new era of discovery. By the early 2000s, the mystery of the Edmund Fitzgerald had become less about what happened and more about whether the truth could ever be known. Expeditions in the 1980s and 1990s, though groundbreaking at the time, produced only partial answers. Divers captured haunting photographs, and sonar revealed the ship's general shape on the lake bed, but the evidence was murky. The wreck remained silent, locked away by depth, darkness, and cold. But technology does not stand still. Nearly 50 years after the tragedy, a new wave of exploration began. In 2023, a team of researchers returned to the Fitzgerald's resting place, armed with tools that previous generations could only dream of. Artificial intelligence, high-definition cameras, and AI-assisted underwater drones. Unlike human divers, these machines could operate at depth for hours, maneuver delicately around fragile wreckage, and record every detail with precision down to the millimeter. This was not simply exploration, it was digital resurrection. The drones were equipped with multi-beam sonar, powerful floodlights, and 4K imaging systems capable of creating a complete 3D reconstruction of the wreck. As the remotely operated vehicles descended into the dark waters, the control room above watched in silence. Grainy outlines gave way to crisp images. Steel beams, rivets, and twisted plates appeared in startling clarity. For the first time since 1975, the Fitzgerald could be studied not as a mystery in the shadows, but as a high-definition record of her final moments. Every scar, fracture, and missing piece was captured and analyzed by AI-driven software. What had once been speculation could now be tested against physical evidence. What investigators saw shocked them. The Fitzgerald wasn't simply a ghost ship lying broken in the mud. She was a story frozen in steel, her final minutes etched into her remains. And what the AI revealed would change everything people thought they knew about her sinking. The tragedy was no longer just about a storm. It was about vulnerabilities hiding in plain sight, weaknesses that had gone unnoticed for years until a perfect storm exposed them. Clues hidden in the steel. As the AI-assisted drone glided over the wreck, its lights revealed details that earlier expeditions had missed. What looked like ordinary decay at first glance turned out to be something far more alarming. Along the length of the cargo hatches, engineers noticed signs of widespread failure. The clamps that were supposed to secure the massive steel hatch covers were not intact. Many were bent, some were corroded beyond recognition, and others were simply missing. Each hatch on the Fitzgerald was held down by 22 heavy-duty clamps, nearly 462 in total across the ship. These clamps were the only barrier keeping Lake Superior's waves from flooding the cargo holds. Without them, every surge of water across the deck could pour directly inside. The drone's footage suggested this wasn't an isolated issue. It was systematic, affecting multiple hatches along the bow. Then came the most disturbing discovery. Near the forward section, the cameras revealed that a vent pipe, designed to release air pressure safely, had been sheared off completely. In its place was a gaping hole leading straight into the cargo hold. To naval experts watching from the control room, the implication was terrifying. This was not just a weak point. It was an open channel funneling thousands of gallons of freezing lake water directly into the ship. AI analysis confirmed the worst. With compromised clamps and an exposed vent, the Fitzgerald could have been taking on water at a rate of more than 4,000 gallons per minute. On the surface, she may have still looked strong, pushing forward through the storm. But beneath the waves, she was drowning silently, her bow dragged lower with each passing minute. For decades, skeptics had dismissed the hatch cover theory as speculation. Families resisted it because it seemed to accuse the crew of negligence. Yet the scans showed it was not neglect. It was hardware failure. The Fitzgerald's defenses had simply given way under the storm's relentless assault. The evidence didn't just explain how she sank. It reshaped the story of her final hours, the final minutes. The AI scans gave chilling context to Captain McSorley's final words. "We are holding our own." To his crew, the Fitzgerald was battered but afloat. They had faced storms before and survived them. On the surface, the ship still appeared solid, pushing through the towering seas. But the evidence now suggests a very different reality below deck. With hatch clamps buckled and a vent pipe torn away, the Fitzgerald was likely flooding at a catastrophic rate. Thousands of gallons of water poured into her forward holds, each surge dragging her bow lower into the waves. Unseen by the men on deck, the ship's balance was shifting, her strength ebbing away with every passing minute. Simulations run with the AI data suggest that within half an hour of the first major breach, the Fitzgerald would have been dangerously unstable. As her bow dipped deeper, she became vulnerable to the towering waves that hammered her relentlessly. One final surge, whether a massive rogue wave or the cumulative weight of the storm, may have forced the bow under, overwhelming her entirely. At that moment, the Fitzgerald's fate was sealed. Her immense length, once an advantage, now worked against her. The stresses on her hull grew unbearable. In an instant, she split apart, her bow plunging straight down to the lake bed, while the stern twisted and flipped before settling nearby. The crew never had a chance. There was no warning siren, no scramble for lifeboats, no desperate SOS call. McSorley's calm assurance moments earlier was not denial. It was the tragic reality that they had no idea how close they were to disaster. They believed they were surviving, even as the Fitzgerald was already dying beneath them. In less than a minute, the largest ship on the Great Lakes vanished, taking all 29 men with her. What followed was silence so complete that it still echoes nearly half a century later. A terrifying truth for all ships. When the drone's footage and AI analysis were shared with maritime experts, the reaction was not relief at finally solving the mystery. It was unease. The findings didn't just explain the Edmund Fitzgerald's fate. They revealed vulnerabilities that applied to an entire generation of Great Lakes freighters. To the untrained eye, a missing clamp or a broken vent might appear minor. But for naval architects, these were catastrophic flaws. The Fitzgerald's hatch clamps and vents were not secondary details. They were her lifeline. With more than 26,000 tons of iron ore pressing down inside, the only thing keeping the storm's fury out of her cargo holds was a network of steel fastenings and seals. Once even a few failed, the balance tipped from survival to catastrophe. What disturbed experts most was the silent nature of the failure. Normally, when a ship is in mortal danger, the crew has at least some warning, enough time to send a mayday or launch flares. But the Fitzgerald gave none. The evidence suggested that her crew remained confident until the very end. The ship didn't capsize dramatically or shatter instantly. Instead, she drowned quietly beneath them, invisible to those aboard. This raised unsettling questions about other freighters built in the same era. How many were sailing with the same vulnerabilities? How many had narrowly avoided disaster in storms, unaware of how close they came to sharing the Fitzgerald's fate? The revelations suggested that the problem wasn't unique to one ship. It was systemic, baked into the very design of mid-20th century bulk carriers. Even inspections offered little reassurance. On calm days in port, clamps and vents might appear intact. But in the chaos of a November gale, they could twist, shear, and fail within minutes. There was no practical way for a crew to monitor or repair them during such conditions. For families of the lost sailors, the discovery brought bittersweet clarity. It proved their loved ones were not to blame. They hadn't neglected their duties. Instead, the Fitzgerald was betrayed by flaws hidden within her design. That truth was terrifying, because it meant the danger was bigger than one storm or one ship. The legacy of oversight. The AI scans of the Edmund Fitzgerald didn't just reveal the mechanics of a tragedy. They exposed uncomfortable questions about oversight, regulation, and responsibility. For decades, The freighter had been celebrated as strong, safe, and reliable. Yet the evidence now showed that hidden weaknesses had gone unaddressed until it was too late. In the aftermath of the sinking, the U.S. Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board each put forth theories, but neither led to sweeping changes in regulation. The hatch cover theory, in particular, was criticized as unfairly blaming the crew. As a result, calls for stricter inspection standards or reinforcement requirements were softened. Ships similar to the Fitzgerald continued to sail, their vulnerabilities largely unexamined. The new AI analysis forces a difficult truth. The tragedy may have been preventable. Stronger hatch clamps, reinforced vent structures, or more rigorous maintenance might have saved the Fitzgerald that night. Instead, the absence of reform left both crew and cargo at the mercy of storms. The oversight failures weren't only about missed inspections, they reflected a broader system that prioritized commerce and speed over safety. This raises troubling questions about accountability. Were regulators unaware of the risks, or did they underestimate the Great Lakes storms? Did shipping companies push their vessels harder than they should have in order to keep industry moving? And most haunting of all, how many warnings were ignored before the Fitzgerald slipped beneath the waves? For the families of the 29 men, these answers bring both comfort and sorrow. Comfort, because the scans vindicate the crew. They hadn't been careless or negligent. They fought bravely until the very end. But sorrow, because the loss wasn't inevitable. It was the result of vulnerabilities that could have been fixed, had the dangers been acknowledged. The Fitzgerald story is not just about a storm. It's about the consequences of looking away, of failing to act until tragedy forces change. Her wreck remains a monument to the cost of oversight that comes too late. Lessons in rust and silence. The Edmund Fitzgerald has become more than a shipwreck. It is a lesson carved in steel and silence. For nearly 50 years, her story has lingered in ballads, news reports, and whispered conversations among sailors. But the AI scans have stripped away the myth, leaving behind a truth both sobering and timeless. The Fitzgerald's sinking was not just a tale of one storm, one ship, or one unlucky night. It revealed how hidden weaknesses, left unchecked, can undo even the strongest of giants. It showed how confidence can blind us to flaws, and how reputation is no shield against nature's fury. For Captain McSorley and his crew, trust in their vessel was absolute, yet beneath their feet, the ship was already failing. That reality makes the tragedy more haunting. The crew never abandoned ship, never sent a mayday, never launched a flare. They believed they were surviving, even in their final moments. The Fitzgerald's end was not explosive or dramatic. It was quiet, a slow suffocation beneath the waves. That silence is what makes her story endure. The wreck, resting in the dark waters of Lake Superior, stands as both grave and monument. Each twisted beam and broken clamp carries a message. That safety cannot be assumed, that oversight must be relentless, and that storms demand respect no matter how mighty a vessel appears. For the families, the scans brought bittersweet vindication. Their loved ones were not at fault. They fought bravely, unaware of how little time remained. But the revelations also brought sorrow, because their deaths might have been prevented had the warnings been heeded earlier. The Edmund Fitzgerald is remembered not only in song, but in the lessons her loss continues to teach. Pride and steel are never enough to outmatch the power of nature. And when history offers its warnings, ignoring them ensures they will be repeated. Nearly 5 decades later, her story still echoes across the Great Lakes, a caution carved in rust, silence, and memory. The Edmund Fitzgerald's silence has finally spoken, thanks to technology that uncovered truths long hidden beneath the waves. If this story left you with questions, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because more untold mysteries are waiting to be revealed.